born in Bristol, which is a city on the west coast of England. I grew up in the Midlands part of England, and then some of the time in the southwest of England. Lived in London for 19 years, and then got out of there and moved to the south coast of England.
Oh,
near Brighton.
Brighton.
Yeah.
Well, Bristol I know because I was a musician once, and I played a festival there. I remember playing a festival in Stratford-upon-Avon.
Oh, yeah, I used to live in Stratford-on-Avon.
Yes. And then, of course, the Glastonbury Festival I played a couple of times as well.
Oh, you've been there? I've been there a few times.
Yeah?
Yeah. I used to perform on the comedy stage there.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and funnily enough, the woman who was in charge of the whole, they called it theatre and circus, that whole area of Glastonbury, was the granddaughter of Winston Churchill. She was called Arabella Churchill. And last night, I was sitting in my ex-wife's house in another district of Budapest, and we had the National Geographic channel on silent, and there was a program about Stalin and various characters in the Second World War, and Lenin. He was actually before the Second World War, but they had all this old colour footage of Winston Churchill climbing out of a RAF aeroplane or military plane and meeting Stalin.
Whoa! And
I was looking at this old footage of Churchill with Stalin, thinking I knew his granddaughter.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
You said you came through in '82. You came through Budapest, and then you went over to Romania.
And then down through Yugoslavia to Greece.
How was it back then?
Well, Budapest, I was only here for a few days. I was here in August, and I stayed in a youth hostel, and I can't remember where it was, but it was sort of a university hall of residence somewhere. And what I remember of it was really hot and sunny, but it was the cheapest place I'd ever been. And I think I still remember that a hamburger and fries cost, I think it was 24 pence in English money. And I remember walking up by the Fisherman's Bastion and by the Hilton Hotel, which was there. At that time. Yeah, exactly the same. It looks exactly the same now as it did then. But obviously it was a bit of an anomaly then. And just, I couldn't understand, I still don't understand quite why the Fisherman's Bastion is so high above the water. But I think it's because they had to protect themselves from pirates. I just loved Budapest. I thought it was amazing. And little did I realise that one day, a girl who I even might have walked past, who I think would have been 4 years old at that time, would become my Hungarian wife, and then my Hungarian ex-wife.
Did you guys meet here?
We met in London, actually, funnily enough. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I came again. The next time I came to Budapest was in 1999, and I did a stand-up gig in I think it's called the Merlin Theatre. And then about a month later, I met to become a wife in a martial arts early morning practice in London.
You studied the martial arts?
Yeah, I used to study Aikido.
Aikido, okay.
I still do in theory.
Oh, beautiful. Wow. I'm a big martial arts fan. I always watch mixed martial arts.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I can't get enough of it, really. If I had life to live again, I think I would have taken some path in that space.
Yeah, well, it's a great thing to do. And what's interesting about martial arts is that great teachers, when they get old, they become more spiritual, and their message tends to be, just be nice to everybody and don't hit anyone. Just be so peaceful that people don't feel any violent thoughts when they're near you.
You, so at that time, how old would you say you were? About 19?
I think I was 23.
23.
Yeah.
And you just wanted to see the world, so you just kind of...
I wanted to go travelling.
Okay.
Yeah. I wanted to see... I'd been working very hard doing a 4-year degree course, and I wanted to go and see Europe.
What were you studying?
I studied theatre.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And so going around seeing the world, was it something that... did that inspire you to, I don't know, do the work that you do now as far as a comedian goes?
Well, I suppose so, because being a stand-up comedian, you do a lot of travelling. So it's just like being a travelling bum, but you get met at the airport and driven to a hotel, and then you meet lots of people, and people pay money to see you and hopefully laugh, and then take you back to the airport, and you go on to the next place. When I was younger, I used to love reading Jack Kerouac books, who was the beat poet who did a lot of travelling, famous for the book On the Road. And that was sort of my inspiration, to just go traveling around. And the lovely thing about doing stand-up is that's what you can do.
Did you do stand-up at 23, 24?
No, I didn't do it until I was 25. I started in earnest when I was 25 years old.
I see.
And it opened the doors for lots of other things.
Okay.
But as an actual stand-up comedian, the reality is I'm actually never really been celebrated by the critics.
Okay.
Nor even really particularly by the public, or by comedy promoters, or by anybody really.
And why would you say? Why would that be?
I don't know. Maybe because there are lots of other comedians who are much better than me.
No, well, I mean, was your journey at the beginning of it? I mean, did you just walk into a place one day and said, "This is what I want to do," or was it like,
No, a friend of mine who I was very good friends with when we were both 16 at college, he started doing stand-up comedy, and he instantly became really famous, and he's a household name. He's called Ben Elton. Very, very well known in the UK. He's probably best known in America for having been the co-writer of Blackadder, the sitcom,
yes,
with Rowan Atkinson. And he also co-wrote The Young Ones, which I think was popular as a cult. It's a sitcom which I think had a cult following in America for a while. He's also written lots of novels, and he's currently actually doing his first stand-up comedy tour for 15 years in the UK, and it's been really, really well received. He's doing all the big A venues, and on Saturday, I'm flying back to the UK tomorrow.
I see.
And then on Saturday, I'm going to go to the Isle of Wight, which is a little island off the coast of southern England, where he's performing in the Shanklin Theatre, and we're going to meet up, and he's paid for me to have a room in the luxury country house hotel where he's staying. And I'm going to see the show, go and see him backstage, and then we're going to have a hangout at the hotel afterwards, just he and I, and
kick old times,
have a few drinks, and
wow.
I'm going to read out from some diaries I wrote of when we were both 16 years old and we went on holiday to a caravan park in Cornwall.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, but it's going to be a good time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is it strange or odd or I don't know? Being that age at 16 or 17, did you ever see either one of you getting into this business?
He always wanted to. He always had such vision, and he always knew he was going to be massively rich and famous, which he is. I didn't have quite so much self-confidence.
Okay.
He came from a very different family background to me. His father was a double professor, his uncle was a professor, and his grandfather was a professor. So he came from a very high-achieving background. His original family name was Ehrenburg, and they were German Jews who fled the Nazis in the Second World War and anglicised their surname to Elton. So he came from I think he was the only sibling in his family who didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge University. But I mean, you could have 10 massively successful careers from what he's achieved. He's at the moment he's got a play on in the West End of London. He's got a novel that's just come out. And he's doing a sold-out stand-up comedy tour of the UK, and he's got another series of a sitcom coming out on the BBC in the UK called Upstart Crow, which is a sitcom about William Shakespeare, and I think it's in its third series now. So he just has all those careers in one career.
Gotcha.
Yeah, incredible guy.
You guys, it sounds like he was almost like a mentor, but at the same age as you guys.
Well, he has. He has always sort of been a mentor to me.
Gotcha.
He was a really great guy. He was the honorary best man at my wedding.
Oh, okay.
He paid for the wedding reception, and then he also helped me out with a divorce.
Oh, was that something that he meant to do? Or?
No. It's because my ex-wife sent him an email asking him to.
Gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, but you decided to travel around the world, and he kind of stayed home.
Well, no, because he actually lives in Australia.
Oh wow! So he traveled himself.
Yeah, well, he married an Australian.
I gotcha.
He was doing a tour of Australia.
Gotcha.
With Rick Mail, who did some, I think, Hollywood films as well. He's sadly no longer with us, but he was a big TV star, comedy actor, and stand-up comedian. And the two of them are doing a stand-up comedy tour of Australia. And the Australian Equity Union rules said that for every 2 non-Australians, I think there had to be 4 Australians in the show or something. So they had a band, an all-girl band, just playing a little bit in the show, just so that they could conform to the Australian Union rules. And Ben fell in love with the saxophonist, and they married, and they have 3 children.
Beautiful.
And they're still married after all these years. She's called Sophie. She's a really lovely person. So he has a lot of time. He spends a lot of time in Australia.
Wow. And you took a different path.
I took a less successful path than him.
Well, it depends on what you define as success.
True. But probably on every level, because his career is far more successful than mine, and his marriage is also far more successful than mine.
But you're in Budapest.
But I'm in Budapest.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I can't think of a better place to be.
I love it. I love this city.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. I'm crazy about the sea and beaches, and I never thought I could fall in love with a city
that
wasn't by the sea.
Way, you know, I got the Pacific Ocean next to me. I grew up, near Hermosa Beach.
Hermosa
South
Beach.
Bay.
Well, I was swimming in Hermosa Beach 11 years ago, and amongst dolphins.
Oh wow! Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were swimming all around us.
It's a beautiful beach. That whole area there. Yeah, I was born in that space.
That's beautiful. I love it. That Manhattan Beach.
Manhattan.
And then going further down, I'm a big fan of Del Mar.
Del Mar is beautiful. Absolutely. Wow. So how much time did you spend in the U.S.?
Well, I used to go out to California years ago and do stand-up. I'd go out like for 5 weeks at a time. And I even supported Greg Proops on a tour. I got to be the middle act in various proper comedy clubs before they all went bust. I did a whole week at Rooster Tea Feathers in Sunnyvale, and I did a place in Vallejo and Cobb's Comedy Club in San Francisco. And I think the most furthest west I've ever performed is in Santa Cruz.
Right.
So I'm a big fan of California.
Okay.
And I also was lucky enough to have some filming work in LA.
Oh, okay.
As well, and in New York.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And what was the time frame?
That would have been in about I think it was 97.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, quite a long time ago now.
Okay, 97. That's not, yeah. 97, 96.
Yeah.
And then Budapest, when you decided to start living here, though, was that, you said 91?
Well, no, I met in 99, I met Ava, my ex-wife.
Right.
And very stupidly, I proposed to her after half a pint of beer spontaneously, because we went into a bar after having done an Aikido session on the south coast of England, and the barman refused to serve her because he didn't believe she was 18. She was actually 24, but she looked young, and I thought, it's not going to get better than this. So I proposed, and she accepted, and we got married 8 months after we first met.
Wow.
But after we first met, we didn't actually see each other again for a little while because I was working in the Netherlands. I proposed to her 5 months after we first met, and we got married 8 months after we first met. And obviously, because she's from Budapest, I started coming over to Budapest
to
see her family and stuff.
I see.
And then we met people, and I did a stand-up comedy gig. And that just opened everything up then, because once I did stand-up comedy here, I met all sorts of people who were in the audience, and then it just roller coasted from there.
How did you meet the Brody guys?
I was introduced to them by a
Peter
guy...
and Will, I'm sorry. Peter and Will.
Yeah, Peter and Will. I was introduced to them by a guy called David Trayford, who, funnily enough, I bumped into on the plane coming over here on this trip, who's a sort of a businessman who is British but has interests here and in other countries. And he introduced me to them when Brody House was the only premises they had. And
so this is back in 90...
That would have been, I think, in the early...
No, 2000, 2004,
yeah, this would have been in
2005,
that sort of time-ish,
like
yeah. Then they said, you must try and do comedy shows here sometime. And then a few years later, I suggested to them that we should try it. It was actually quite a long time later, because the first comedy shows we had in what's now called the Studios and was then called Brody Studios was in 2014.
2014. Okay.
Until then, there were various other things going on, comedy shows and stuff. But in 2014 we had the first show, and they've been running most months ever since, and just get more and more popular.
I remember seeing you on stage before we actually met.
Yeah.
And you did, you did a sketch, and I just remembered you taking your shirt off and showing us how beautiful your belly was when you were talking about something that was very, it was one of the funniest things I had seen since I've been actually in Europe, because,
Really?
I thought
I don't remember that. It must have been spontaneous, because I never planned it. I never wrote down on a bit of paper, take shirt off.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. It felt so impromptu, but it felt so natural, and it just went well.
Oh, I think the audience probably called for me to do it.
Really?
Yeah, because I wouldn't have just taken the shirt off.
Well, why not?
I don't do manual labour. There's no reason to take my shirt off unless I'm going to bed.
But I didn't remember that was you until we actually started talking. And then I started talking to Peter and Will, the owners of Brody, and then I thought, that is that same gentleman. Wow. So I just want to kind of go back here. So your girlfriend, she had to leave to come to back to Budapest, or she just decided she missed home, or?
My ex-wife?
Yes, your ex-wife. Yeah.
Well, what happened was I met her in London, and then we had children who are now two lovely little girls who are now aged 11 and 10.
Beautiful.
And the stresses of having children and just being us meant that sometimes my ex-wife would sort of leave and come and live in one of the apartments I bought in Budapest.
Gotcha.
And live here for a while. And then we'd sort of try and make it up, and she'd come back with the kids, and we'd live back in England for a while. And then it would all be a meltdown, and she'd come back to Budapest again. And sort of as the marriage disintegrated, when she divorced me, she then just came back here, and she's been living here with the kids ever since. I should say that there are certain mitigating circumstances to this. One is that my ex-wife Ava, she's a lovely girl, but she's not the best person at running a house or anything. So she doesn't really do housework and domestic stuff very much. She's improved it a lot, but so it's a bit like not having a wife and two daughters. It's like having three daughters.
Gotcha.
So I was never that happy about the fact that we lived in a very, very untidy, chaotic house. And if I didn't want us to run out of toilet paper, or I wanted the sheets changed on the bed or something, I'd have to sort of do it myself, which was, before we had kids, was sort of okay, and I could pay a cleaner. But then when we had kids and my income went down and stuff, it was harder. But the other much more important mitigating factor is that Betty, our older child, is not like other children. And she is so not like other children that she's officially labelled as severely disabled.
Okay.
And right from the start, when she was born, we were going to hospitals to take her to see consultants. And within a year, we were taking her to 6 different hospitals. And one of them was a professor of genetics who we were seeing. And we never got a diagnosis. We've had one recently this year. She's finally been diagnosed as autistic. But there are other things as well. She's blind in one eye, and she used to be officially having a hearing deficiency as well, being partially deaf. But that seems to have sort of just fallen away. I mean, compared to what it was like when she was a baby and when she was a very young child, it's almost like a miracle healing. She's so much improved.
That's beautiful.
But she is the most beautiful, lovely child you could imagine. And in some ways, she's very intelligent. But in other ways, she can't open a crisp packet, a chip packet, and she can't really do buttons or zips. So there are like massive variations in what she can do or what she wants to do. But anyway, so that the whole experience of becoming parents was very different from most people's experience of becoming parents, because we had this child who was just like so totally different, and nobody could really give us any information that was of much use to us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like just one example, when she was a baby, we drove from England to Budapest, which is 1,000 miles or 1,600 kilometers. And we'd be driving the car on the Autobahn going through Germany. And Betty would be sitting in the little baby seat at the back of the car, banging her head from side to side and making this weird noise, which just went through us and just drove us mad, because it was the most unbearable sound you could imagine. If they tried to make a sound that drove people insane, this would be the sound. Mm-hmm. And of course, she was banging her head,
hurting herself,
left to right, side to side, mm-hmm. as we're trying to drive the car. Mm-hmm. And it just got worse and worse because it's a 3-day journey. Mm-hmm. And in the end, we were just playing heavy metal music on full volume to try and drown out the sound of this kid, And as soon as she could crawl, it was just mayhem. I mean, she when she was 3 years old, she nearly killed a Holocaust survivor because we had an apartment in Budapest in the Jewish district. And there was a woman in her 90s who used to live on the ground floor apartment below us, who had survived the camps, mm-hmm. concentration camps. And she used to enjoy sitting outside in the sunshine outside her front door on a summer's day. And Betty, when she was 3, decided to throw a whole load of stuff off the balcony.
Oh, no.
And it missed her by millimetres. And if it hadn't been for luckily missing her by millimetres, then she'd have, survived the Nazi Holocaust, but not our 3-year-old child, Betty.
Have you ever thought about writing a book?
Well, people always used to say, write a book about it, but the irony is that the one thing that having a child like that takes up is time.
I understand.
So,
right.
All your time gets taken up taking her to the 6 different hospitals, sure. or, clearing up the messes, sweeping up broken glass, doing all the things you have to do. Yeah. And that doesn't leave you much time for writing.
Right, of course. Of course, yes. I bet you there's. I don't have any kids, but I, at some point, still would like to have children. At some point,
don't leave it too long. I left it till I was 49, and that was a mistake.
Really? Oh yeah, because of the energy level probably is not as strong as.
No.
Do they speak Hungarian?
They both speak Hungarian, and they both speak fluent Hungarian and fluent English.
Okay.
When they were living in England, they spoke better English than Hungarian. Now they're in Hungary, they speak better Hungarian than English. But if you spoke to Heidi, you wouldn't know that she wasn't an English girl, because she speaks fluent English, mm-hmm. in like native English. Although some words she doesn't know, as if maybe if she lived in England all the time. Betty speaks differently anyway, so you can't really understand necessarily what she's saying, and even we sometimes have to ask her to repeat herself several times. Mm. Like recently, she was saying "Blaha Louisa Ter."
She sounds like me, actually.
It took a while for us to get that she was saying "Blaha Louisa Ter," but she does speak Hungarian and English, and she can even translate for us. My ex-wife's parents, my ex-parents-in-law, are Hungarian and don't speak English at all.
Gotcha.
So obviously, and they are the best. I know it sounds stupid, but they are the best grandparents in the world. Without them, we would have gone under. Mm. They are the most amazing people I've ever known in my life. They're just 2 normal Hungarians. I say uneducated. My ex-father-in-law can speak German. Mm. But they are just the most wonderful people, and they adore the children, our children, their grandchildren, unconditionally.
Do they live in Budapest?
They live in Budapest in District 10 in Kőbánya.
I see.
Their lives are devoted to their grandchildren, and they sort of when I first met them all those years ago, I was a guy working in show business, still with hope of possibly becoming really rich and famous, doing TV shows, appearing in little parts in feature films, and in my ignorance and stupidity, I didn't really have that great a view of them, because they were 2 Hungarian people who had grown up in this communist 10-story housing project block of flats, or they'd lived in them. The whole family of 4 grew up in a 54 square metre 1-bedroom flat in this big council block. And I was obviously, more interested in my celebrity friends and people who were, successful, who could give me success. And so they didn't really count very high in my sort of assessment of them as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, was I wrong. And over the years, I've learned so much from them, and they are two of my favorite people in the world. And the most important thing is they've taught me how to love. Because the way they love my daughter Betty, especially, because she takes so much more resources and so much more because of, she's so vulnerable. The way they love her has sort of taught me how to love her. And I found it very hard to accept having a child who, my whole career just sort of ended really because my whole life just went into a meltdown and crisis to deal with having this child. And so I didn't have time to go to auditions or write emails or, schmooze or go to parties or whatever it was. It was all about trying to deal with this child. And I did, to my terrible disgrace and discredit, I couldn't really accept her, very, very easily, because it just totally ruined my life. It felt like my whole life had been ruined. And the way they just love her and adore her and accept her and give her unconditional love, they sort of led me into the same consciousness and awareness, and taught me how to love. And now I just adore, my whole life is devoted to those children. My career, I work and everything, and I love it, and I love my work, but it's not as important as those children. Those children are more important than anything.
Wow.
And I learned that from these two ordinary people? Hungarian people who are now in their 70s,
Who you can't communicate directly with.
Yeah, well, only in my bad Hungarian. And I can speak with my ex-father-in-law in a bit mixture of Hungarian and German. And we can keep going for 30 minutes, he understands my appalling Hungarian and appalling German. One of the reasons I want to spend more time here in Budapest is I want to go to more auditions for Hollywood films.
Oh, okay.
I got down to the last two for a speaking role in a Hollywood film here, but another guy got the part. It was a speaking role in 2 scenes in Welcome to Harmony, which was a Hollywood film. I haven't seen it. But,
okay.
But I know the guy who got the role, and apparently it was reduced from a speaking role in 2 scenes to going, and being shot with a machine gun.
Oh, okay.
But the money would have been the same.
Is there a lot of films that come through Budapest?
Well, there are loads. I don't know that much about it, but apparently all the big Hollywood studios have got film. They've got the studios booked up.
Okay.
And when I run these comedy shows, because I run the comedy shows and I host them myself, which is when you saw me in Budapest, it's a way, obviously, of having. I need to be here and earn money so I can be here with my ex-wife and kids. And what we do is we fly comedians in from other countries to perform at the show, and we always used to get accommodation in what was called Brody Apartments and is now called the Living Quarters, which is the apartment building owned by Peter and William. But now we can't get in there because they're all rented out long-term to Hollywood film companies.
Right, yeah.
We have to stay in the boutique hotel instead.
They have some pretty amazing properties over there.
They've got, it's lovely. And of course, there's the Keenshem House, which is sort of...
That just recently opened up.
Yeah.
That's beautiful there. Are you gonna have any work coming out of there?
Well, I don't know. I hope so. They've got apparently the stables can seat 300 people.
Really?
Yeah. William took me there about 8 years ago and showed me around. And they've had it all that time, and they've never managed to get it, done up yet.
Do you know the story about that place?
It was owned by a Hungarian aristocrat, and he owned this racehorse Keenshem, which is the Hungarian word for treasure, and it was the most successful racehorse in history. It never lost a race, apparently.
And it lived there.
Yeah, and it lived in the house. And the stadium is called, the big horse racing stadium in Budapest is called the Keenshem Stadium. And the guy also had a secret door from his mistress's bedroom into his bedroom, even though I think he wasn't even married. But in those days, and it was a very different time, even if you weren't married, you still had to have a secret door between your mistress's bedroom and your bedroom.
That's been my problem.
Yeah, what's your secret door, Ray?
Secret door? That's hilarious. Wow, that's in that. So that building there, they have a few buildings. They have that one. They have the one at, called Villa.
Oh, the Writers' Villa.
That's it.
Yeah, they don't own that one. They only lease that one.
Okay.
But I've been there. I've stayed there actually, and that is owned by a guy called, oh my goodness, I've got to try and remember his name now. Nap Schoten. Jaap Scholten. It's actually owned by his wife. He's a Dutch guy who's married to a Hungarian aristocrat, and they own that house. And it's been restored to its original, being British, I say Victorian, but that's because I refer to the time when Queen Victoria was a queen, but obviously for other people all over the world, it's a bit arrogant to expect other people to know when our queen was alive, Queen Victoria. But basically sort of 19th century.
Okay.
It's restored to its 19th century glory as an aristocratic villa. Beautiful. And it's quite interesting because Jaap Scholten, who wrote a book, he's written various books, and he wrote a really interesting book called Comrade Baron, and it's about the Hungarian aristocracy and what happened to them after the end of the Second World War. What I'm saying now is because of having read his book. It's unusual to have a Hungarian aristocrat because there was a sort of a terrible purge at the end of the Second World War, and lots of the Hungarian aristocrats were killed. It was a sort of like the Holocaust, but on a smaller scale. And people who were upper class and Hungarian got sort of rounded up and put in camps, and lots of them died. All were killed. And you can now get a situation where you can have a Hungarian aristocrat who is a baron or something, and they're wearing like a tracksuit, and they're in a little tiny one-bedroom apartment in a housing project somewhere.
Right.
Smoking cigarettes.
Boy, it's just it's amazing the resilience of Hungarians, with all of the challenges that they've had to deal with.
Yeah, I know. I mean, my ex-wife. I mean, it's amazing she's still alive.
What's
No, that was a very bad attempt at a
I was
joke.
gonna be like, oh my God, I had to think about that. Like, how old is she? Did you hear about her parents or even grandparents and their story?
Yes, I have. There's one story which is so complicated I can't quite understand it. I've never quite understood it, but it involves on her mother's side. It involves some situation where somebody got arrested and then sent to Russia and put in prison, and then they assumed he died, and the woman married another guy and had kids with him, and then he escaped the prison or camp in Russia and came back to Hungary and turned up and said, "Hey, I'm back, darling." Oh, because she had another husband and other kids.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's something like that, but it's even more complex than that.
That's a movie.
I suppose it is, isn't it? Yeah.
That would be a great movie.
Well, when the kids get older, maybe I can write it.
Have you ever thought about writing a movie or like film or anything related to that? I mean,
I'd like to. I mean, I've written stories and stuff, but my novel, The Sex Life of a Comedian, that could be adapted into a film.
Okay.
I wrote it with it being adapted into a screenplay in mind.
Gotcha. And when did you write that?
I wrote that in about 2004.
Okay.
It's quite a long time ago, before we had kids.
I see. Wow. I started coming to Hungary 2001.
Really?
I think it was. Yeah.
And what made you come to Hungary?
I always wanted to live in Europe.
Gosh.
And I was a musician prior, traveling internationally with various acts, and including my dad's act I was telling you about.
Remind me of the name of the band he was in.
War.
That's right, yeah.
War. Eric Burton found them playing in a club on Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah.
I think it was the Whiskey Go-Go, if you remember that place.
Yep.
And their band, they were the first black band to be booked on the Sunset Strip.
Wow.
And so Eric left the Animals and decided that he wanted to have a black band. So he went to L.A., went on Sunset Boulevard, went to Whiskey Go-Go with this other gentleman who ended up becoming the producer of the band. Mm-hmm. And they heard my dad play drums and all of them playing, and it's like, oh yeah, we got to hire these guys. And so their first hit, I don't know if you know or not, but their first hit was a song called "Spill the Wine."
Spill the Wine. Wow.
It was a big hit back in '69.
Yeah.
Eric Burton Actually, I mean, Eric Burton was good friends with, what's the gentleman's name? Jimi Hendrix.
Jimi Hendrix, wow.
And my dad was playing drums with Jimi Hendrix the night before he passed.
Really?
Yeah, they had dinner that evening. And
my goodness.
So they had a lot of history coming through Europe. So I heard all those stories growing up. And I always wanted to travel. I always wanted to be a musician. So I decided to just kind of see the world that way.
Yeah.
And then when I found Europe, I said, I got to live here. I got to figure out a way to live here. So Hungary was an option for me. I had a friend of mine already here. He said, why don't you come out? Why don't we do something creative? It's like, I'm coming. 6 months later, I came and fell in love with it.
Have you been here ever since?
No, I kept coming in and out for the most part. But I don't know, just fell in love with this place like you. I mean, I wish I would have seen it the times that you saw it, though.
Yeah.
Like you said, you started coming in 90.
Well, the first time was in 82.
82, excuse me.
Yeah. And then after that, sort of 2001.
I mean, I just wish I could be a fly on the wall just to see what it was like just getting past the border or being in Budapest or being in the countryside or any of that.
Well, it was really weird. I mean, I remember when on the train coming from Vienna to Budapest, the train would stop at the border and they had these like little concrete plinths between the railway tracks on either side of the track all the way along. And a soldier would come and stand with a gun and stand on the plinth all the time while the train was stopped being checked by customs and everything.
Wow.
And anybody, and I think it's a long time ago, so it's hard to remember, but I think definitely coming out, because obviously people were trying to get out of the Russian bloc rather than in. Mm-hmm. So I think it was more on the way out than on the way in, but even on the way in they did it. But at some point, I can't remember whether it was going in or going out, but they had all these soldiers with the rifles. So basically anybody like trying to get on the train or off the train would be shot. And then they would come in. Yeah, oh yeah. And they'd come in and they'd search every compartment and they searched the overhead racks to make sure nobody was hiding on an overhead rack. It was really, really a big deal crossing over from non-communist to communist.
So it was about having the passport was the saving grace for certain people that were not Hungarian, basically? I mean, you said you were coming through. You were coming through with a British passport?
Well, yeah, I had a British passport, and obviously I just had a visa to track.
You had to have a visa to come here?
Yeah, I had to get a visa to come to Hungary and also to go into Romania. Okay. Romania was even more heavy because Hungary was always a slightly sort of better off relation. You know, they were a bit freer. They were allowed to own a weekend house. They weren't quite so controlled as in other countries. But in Romania, that was under Ceausescu. And I had this thing, I wanted to go to Transylvania because of the
Me too. I've always wanted to too, yeah.
So I went to Sibiu, which is, the German name is Hermannstadt in the Transylvanian Alps. And I couldn't find anywhere to stay because there wasn't anywhere to stay. And people were afraid to have me in their house. People wanted to have me in their house. They couldn't have been friendlier. And they would have had me in their house just as a guest without wanting any money from me. But they were afraid that if they did, they would then be arrested and put in prison.
Why?
Because they would have had a Westerner in their house, which would mean that they were to do with spying or something.
Oh.
It would be seen as being subversive.
Interesting.
So they were friendly, but they couldn't have me in their homes. So I actually slept rough in a park with 2 East German hippies. Because obviously the East Germans could come on holiday to communist countries. That's the only places they could go on holiday. Mm. And so they had like long hair and beards, but they just came from East Germany and they were sort of in Transylvania.
Wow.
And they were sort of saying, wow, you're English, do you know the Beatles,
Of course I do. Wow, interesting. So when you were in Budapest, did you ever venture outside? How long were you here for? You weren't here for that first time.
I don't think I was here for very long. It's only a few days.
Okay.
Because I just
and you stayed in Budapest basically, or did you kind of venture on the countryside at all?
No, I just stayed in Budapest and then for a few days and then got the train onwards into Romania.
Have you had a chance to, obviously by now, right? You've gone to the countryside and seen many things?
I know fairly well. I mean, I've been to Lake Balaton.
Okay.
I've been to Eger, Shalok, up in the Matra Mountains. I've been to Kecskemét. Mm-hmm. I've been to Popper, which is where there's a big American Air Force base.
I was there.
Yeah, performed
Actually,
there a few
I went
times.
there. No, I haven't been there. No, I read about it. I thought I'd been there, but no, now I realize They have a military base, you said?
There's a big American Air Force base. They have the big Galaxy C-5 transport planes, which apparently now they charter out. So anyone can charter one.
Oh, really?
I think probably even North Korea could rent one.
Oh, my God.
I've driven to Croatia quite a few times.
Okay.
So that route takes you south of Lake Balaton and through Chamorj and then out into Croatia. It's a beautiful place, Hungary.
Yeah, it's nice to. I like taking trains, actually. I don't know, the feeling of getting on a train and just discovering. I mean,
well, I come from Vienna. I go backwards and forwards to Vienna by train quite a bit.
Do you? Do you work in Vienna a lot?
Yeah, I do a gig in Vienna because when we have the shows in Budapest, we fly the comedians to Vienna. They do a show in Vienna, and then we all get the train to Budapest and we do the show in Budapest.
So you have like your own agency, basically.
Not really, no. It's just Dave and his old comedy friends.
Okay, gotcha.
Dave and his friends who are stand-up comedians who are going to be reliable and not let him down.
Oh, totally understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, this business. Jesus. Wow. Man, I just, I'm glad we're just sat here. I wanted to pick your brain about your history and your past and all that stuff, and kind of impromptu, so to speak. I know we didn't do a shot of Unicum together. That's something I kind of wanted to do, but
I don't normally drink before 6.
I was going to say, yes, I normally don't drink until I have a drinking buddy. So
yeah. I'm not a big drinking man.
I actually met these people. Have you had a chance to meet the Swags?
Unicom?
Yeah.
I've drunk Unicom before. I haven't met Mr. Unicom.
Yes, it's a family called Swag, actually.
Swag, yeah.
Yeah, they come to Brody all the time.
Do they?
Yeah, they pop in. They probably have met him and didn't even know.
Wow, yeah. Probably.
Kind of very laid back. Their stories really.
I might have made them laugh and I've not even known.
Didn't even know it.
Gosh.
Yeah. Nice guys, nice people, actually.
All right, I'd like to meet them.
Yeah. Any gigs happening over at Brody Studios coming up?
Well, on the 14th of January, we've got this live recording thing, which you're not available to be involved with, but you were the first choice. Oh. You were the guy that they sent me to. And then the next night, on the 15th of January, we have an actual regular comedy club night. And then we'll have another one in February, which I won't be at because I'll be performing in Singapore.
Right on.
We have another one in March, but I won't be at that one because I'm performing on the Isle of Man. Do you know where the Isle of Man is?
I do not.
The Isle of Man is an island in between Ireland and Britain. And it's a small island, and it's like, a bit like, have you heard of the Channel Isles?
I haven't.
The Channel Isles are a group of islands between France and Britain, and they're sort of tax havens. They, I suppose, like Bermuda or Panama or somewhere like that.
Okay.
Or
Cyprus.
Yeah, they basically make a living by having special tax type concessions. So when you get super rich, you become a resident of that place. And,
gotcha.
And the Isle of Man is one of those. It's sort of a money finance place. And I'm doing a comedy show there.
That's a nice place. It sounds to get to know people.
Yes.
As well as do comedy.
That's right.
Make people laugh there.
Although sometimes it's quite hard to make rich people laugh.
And why is that?
Well, sometimes because they're so rich, they're laughing anyway. but more often because they are too important to laugh. Because if people, it depends largely on the sort of rich people. But if people are very, very high status and they want to keep a
certain image,
an image of being high status, then laughing is sort of like can be like a lower status. It like lowers your status to laugh.
Is that certain kind of a is that a cultural thing, or?
Well, yes, it's a cultural thing, but it depends on the laughter as well, because obviously there's cruel laughter. So, for example, a medieval king might enjoy trampling a peasant to the ground on his horse and then laughing.
Right.
As he watches the peasant twitch with agony and the wife and children cry around the dying peasant. He would cruelly enjoy laughing at that. So that wouldn't be lowering his status. That would be sort of increasing his status as the king who tramples peasants to death with his horse. But in another situation, you could go to a nightclub, an exclusive nightclub, which has rich people sitting in it, and you do jokes, and they, because maybe they're aware of their status with all the other people around them, I don't know, they're just too, it's too important to laugh.
If I was a comedian and I was in that kind of circumstance, I would it would be my desire to try to break that thing, of making people that wouldn't normally laugh
Yeah.
and getting them to laugh.
Yeah, but you're sort of like the court jester in front of a king in those situations, because especially if it's a corporate thing, the last thing that they want you to do is to offend their clients or offend their guests.
Even if they laugh.
Yeah, possibly. But then the thing is they probably don't laugh. They might not laugh.
Okay,
So
so it's a risk.
To get them to laugh.
Do you have to be careful with certain material depending on where you're at?
You do, because the thing with the corporate situation is that if, supposing a comedian performs in a corporate situation and they do a sexist joke and somebody laughs at the sexist joke, on Monday morning, hey, you laughed at that sexist joke, you're sexist.
Gotcha. So it has nothing to do with the evening or enjoying the evening as it is, but it carries over into something that...
Yeah. People are, they're a group already who know each other and spend their lives with each other. And so they don't want to give ammunition to people by being seen to laugh at something that's inappropriate. And of course, when you're doing comedy, there are only so many things you can make jokes about. And comedy is not a squeaky clean political thing. It's about things going wrong and people saying things they shouldn't say. Things going not planned.
Sure.
Otherwise, it's a juggling routine.
Right.
That's why on cruise ships and in corporate situations they often have magicians and jugglers.
I didn't know that. I didn't even think about that.
Because it's harder to offend somebody by juggling or by doing a magic trick.
I didn't think about this, that the situation where if you were joking about something and someone laughs about it, and then, like you said, that Monday morning they go to work and all of a sudden they're now accused of being something that they're...
Yeah.
I would never think.
And it can even happen with couples. If you've got a comedy gig and you've got lots of couples in the audience, then it's harder for a beautiful woman to be a successful comedian. Because
why is that?
Well, for one of the reasons is because if a beautiful woman is performing stand-up and a couple go and the husband laughs a lot, the husband might be given a hard time
because
when he gets home.
Got it.
Or if a male stand-up comedian does sexist jokes, the husband might get given a hard time for laughing at the sexist jokes. And it can go the other way as well. Also, of course, the wife might get given a hard time for liking the handsome comedian or laughing about the jokes about erectile dysfunction.
Do you find yourself looking in the crowd and knowing right away what you can do and what you can't? Or does it take time?
Yeah. You look at them, you have to read the audience and try and understand what's going to make them laugh and what isn't going to make them laugh.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's all very difficult, complex, especially in a corporate type situation. And if you're performing to rich people, it might be that they've paid for you to perform to them. So the last thing they want is to be offended.
Okay.
You're singing for your supper.
Well, the U.S.
is court jester.
In the U.S. is a bit different, or at least I don't know, maybe I should say some of the black comedians, when you go into a situation and they pay you to come in, these comedians will go right at you. Like, they just don't care, but the audience wants that, I mean, they kind of want that. And they're, basketball players, football players, or whatever, they're successful people that are being clowned basically in front. Yeah.
Well, there are many, many dynamics. A lot of it is about status, with comedy, because if you've got somebody slips on a banana skin and falls over, that's a loss of status. And so sometimes it's funny because somebody's gone from higher status to low status. And sitcoms are all about the interplay of status. And that's the dynamic, So some comedians are high status and they treat the audience as low status, and the audience sort of buys into that and they know that's what's going to happen. But other times you've got like low status performers, like for example Steve Martin. His persona when he was a stand-up comedian was a low status buffoon, a fool, more of the idiot. But it's all summed up, I think, that whole dynamic about the status and the interaction between a comedian and the audience. There's an old cartoon, and I'm here taking a risk by describing a cartoon. But the cartoon, it's the old cliche that I don't know whether it's familiar to you, but it's certainly familiar in Britain and European places, I think, where you've got the dungeon. It's going back to medieval times, and you've got the dungeon, and you've got the prisoner who's like hanging from the wall in chains, where his wrists are shackled to the wall in chains, and they're just like hanging from the wall. and they've usually got long hair and a long beard because they've been there for so long. And there's a situation where you've got the wall and you've got the two people who've obviously just been shackled to the wall for years with the long hair and the long beard. And then in the middle of them is a court jester who's obviously just been shackled there. And he's turning to the other guys. He said, "It was all going so well till I mentioned the Queen's moustache."
Oh. Yeah.
And so the situation obviously was in our imagination, we figured it out that the court jester was entertaining the king and the queen and the court, and he was going well and he's killing and they're all laughing, and then he just goes one step too far and refers to the queen as a moustache, and that's it.
And that's it.
Guards.
That's all it really takes sometimes, I guess, huh?
Take him to the dungeon and chain him to the wall, where he'll be until he dies.
Very cool. Dave?
Ray,
thank you for hanging out with me, man.
thank you, man. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah?
I love your apartment.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I wanted to make you feel at home, and wow.
And the water's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I haven't set the name purposely because we're waiting until till we have it in a bottle, but very soon you'll have access to it for sure. You can come anytime. You can come to the well if you'd like. It's pretty cool.
I'd love to come to the well.
Absolutely. Anytime.